Have you heard that if we don't get enough sleep, our brain literally shrinks? Had this made you worried? If so, I'm so glad to share with you that in this episode of Heard Online, we look at a brand new study, the largest ever on the subject, showing no evidence whatsoever that little sleep shrinks the brain. Not at all. No evidence found. I'm super excited for this. Really, really happy to share this with you. So, without further ado, let's jump in and look at the study. Actually, I do have a little announcement. In case you didn't see this yesterday, I'm really, really excited about the new free mini course that's called Ready to Sleep in 5 Days. It is available now on our website, and our website is, of course, thesleepcoachschool.com. I put together like a 5 day mini course that I hope you'll find really, really helpful. So if you haven't already done it, do check it out. All right. With that said, let's jump into this Heard Online episode. And if you're new to Heard Online, this is a series of investigative videos where we take a look at claims made about sleep on the World Wide Web. And a common one is that, if you don't get enough sleep, it'll affect your brain. Your brain will shrink. And the other week, I got an email from actually one of our newest coaches. Her name is Sissy, and she said, "Hey, Daniel, check this out." And it was an article in Danish because this is from Denmark that has said that, hey, this what we hear about not getting enough sleep shrinking the brain, it's not true. And so I read that article, and it linked to like two articles in English. And the first one was this one, which was from the New Scientist, and it's a very, very nice title, and something fresh or different here, right? When you see this, so the title is "You Probably Don't Need 8 hours of sleep for a Healthy Brain." And some of you remember my trigger meter, which I kind of like rate how triggering a title is, and I would say this is 0. This is kind of like minus. This is like a really, really nice and helpful title in my humble opinion. And this article goes on to say the largest analysis of brain scanning data yet casts doubt on the idea that shorter sleep duration is linked to shrinkage of the brain. And then it goes on to say everyone knows that going to bed too late can leave you less alert the next day. 100%. I agree with this totally. Right? We all know this. But recent claims have gone further, promoting the idea that regularly getting too little sleep raises the risk of Alzheimer's disease and even shrinks the brain. And you see this, whoever wrote this article, I think did it in such a beautiful way, because they're saying like, oh, but that's not all we hear nowadays. We're kind of like this. There's this alarmist message out in the air, out there saying, and then goes on to say, now this idea has been challenged by one of the most comprehensive analysis of brain scanning studies to date. So how much do we really need to worry about getting enough shut eye? And unfortunately, then the rest is behind a paywall, but it doesn't really matter much, because what I always want to do is, of course, go back to the the original study, and this the what we're looking at here from the New Scientist is kind of a summary, or an article based on an actual scientific article. So we are going to take a quick look at the actual article, the scientific article, and that one is from human. It's called Nature Human Behavior. So it's not the very well-known scientific journal Nature itself, but kind of a subsidiary, I guess you can call it, of Nature. And here you see the title and headline up here. It's called no phenotypic or genotypic evidence for a link between sleep duration and brain atrophy. It was published October 2023, and it's a Norwegian group, Anders Fjell and co-workers. And I'm actually not going to show you more from this article. I just want to show you that, here it is, it exists, but I've made some notes from it. And so what they did was the following. So they had they had longitudinal data from the Life Brain Consortium. I don't know what the Life Brain Consortium is, but I'm imagining that it's one of those kind of like population-based, like very large studies where they do like, in this case, MRI scans of a bunch of people, and then follow people over time to see if they can correlate, changes in brain with something else, something like that. No, but so they had data from a lot of MRI scans, and more specifically, they had 8,153 MRI brain scans from almost 4,000 people, covering up to 11.2 years, meaning that there were as many as 11 years between the first and the last MRI scan from a certain individual. You could just by looking at the numbers, you can see that most of the people in the study had 2 scans, right? Because there were about 4,000 people and about 8,000 scans, right? But they were up to, I think, 7 scans. Some people had many more scans, right? But so they had again about 8,000 scans from 4,000 people, and what they were looking to do is the following. They were asking these people to estimate how much they slept, right? So they had an estimate of their sleep duration, and then they tried to correlate like the difference in the brain scan. So atrophy, like shrinking of the brain from the first scan to the second scan, or first scan to the third scan, or whatever it was. Was there a bigger change in brain size, like more shrinking of the brain, if you will, for those people who reported sleeping less compared to people who slept more? In other words, did self-reported short sleep lead to atrophy when comparing MRI scans? And quoting the article, they say, "We found no evidence for an association between sleep duration and brain atrophy." And that to me is like, wonderful. That's amazing. This is so nice to hear. It takes away so much, pressure for us when we know that people who reported sleeping less, they did not have more shrinking of the brain. There was nothing seen there. So I think that's wonderful. Now, if you found everything you want from this video, it's fine to, of course, like check out here, because this was the main thing I want to communicate. But there's one more thing that struck me in the article that is a topic that comes up again and again and again and again and again. So I felt it's worthwhile looking at it. So what the authors did was, not only did they do this kind of longitudinal evaluation, but they also did kind of a cross-sectional evaluation, if you will, looking at, like, for people that they just had, let's say, one MRI scan and one time where people reported how much they estimated sleeping. They were looking at, okay, was there association between brain size, or the thickness of the cortex of the brain, and how much people slept at any given moment. And there was, and we'll look at that in a second. But firstly, I want to show something different that they write about in the this article. And they say that less than 5 hours and 8 hours of sleep were associated with similar increases in risk of premature death in other studies. So there are many studies that have looked at, like, if if somebody dies for any reason, prematurely. I don't know what that exactly means, but they people die before kind of maybe the average life expectancy for any reason. Is that associated with how much that those people report sleeping? And there have been actually many studies where people just are asked randomly, like, how much do you think you sleep at this point? And then these people are followed over many years. And if somebody dies early, they check, like, okay, did these people report sleeping this much or this much, etc. And what has been found very consistently is that people who estimate sleeping little and people who estimate sleeping quote unquote a lot are at a higher risk. But the interesting thing I think here is that, as they point out here, it's like less than 5 hours and sleeping 8 hours is equally elevated risk, which is so different from when we hear, like, how much we're supposed to sleep. The recommendation is typically that an adult should sleep between 7 to 9 hours. But if that is supposedly based on facts or studies, then why is that? Because, like, sleeping 8 hours is supposedly like just as risky, quote unquote, as sleeping like less than 5 hours. And so I think this really puts a question into the recommendations out there. Where do they come from? Who makes up these numbers? Now, for anybody who got, like, frazzled or scared when they heard me talk about, like, sleep duration and risk of premature death for any reason, I think this has nothing to do with sleep. Firstly, remember that these studies are always self-reported. They're self-reported. We don't know how much people in these studies actually sleep. And I think this helps explain it, because if somebody has some type of health issue, whatever health issue it is, it often affects sleep, and it can affect sleep in the way that we have trouble sleeping, we don't sleep well, and we estimate sleeping little, or we have trouble sleeping and we sleep, we feel tired and sleepy, and we estimate sleeping more. So, like, our health can make us think we sleep less and think we sleep more, and our self-reported sleep duration can change in this way. But when we have no health issues, we typically say, oh, yeah, I think I sleep around 7 hours. Most people who have no health problems estimate sleeping, 6.5, 7 hours, something like that. Now, going back to the study, they said um, this mirrors, and when I say this, they means like that short sleep and quote unquote normal sleep was kind of like high risk. This mirrors the present results. 4 and 8 hours of sleep were associated with the same deviations from maximum cortical thickness. So in this cross-sectional study they had done, where they just looked at, okay, this is cortical, the size of the cortex, human cortex, and this is how much these people slept at like one point in time. They saw that people who reported sleeping 4 hours and 8 hours both had like a change, like they had more, let's say, shrinkage or more atrophy, compared to others. And what they're pointing out here is that, again, like, it's people in quote unquote normal, like people in quote unquote normal sleep duration, like 8 hours, have just as much atrophy as people who report sleeping 4 hours. And they like really puts in question, like, why we have these recommendations. So the second part of the study was, again, to me, is like questioning these recommendations. And I wrote here, like, is it time to change these recommendations around how much we should sleep, or maybe just leave numbers altogether? That is, in my humble opinion, would be so helpful to no longer have like the National Sleep Foundation or the CDC or other, like, public health agencies say like, oh, you should sleep this much, because it just creates so much pressure and so much tension and anxiety and friction and so much insomnia, frankly. So I'll conclude this episode of Heard Online here. Please let me know in the comment section what you thought. And again, if you haven't already seen it, we have now our free mini course on our website, which is thesleepcoachtool.com. So if you haven't already checked it out, I highly recommend it. I feel like it became a really nice course. But I'll conclude there. See you next time, and thank you for tuning in today.